Welcome to QT Connect Cafe, where we tell stories about everything queer in tech. I'm Naufal, co-founder at Queer Tech, and your host today. As you know, Queer Tech is based in Tehuantepec, Montreal, and we would like to begin by acknowledging that Queer Tech is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodian of the lands and the waters on which we gather today. As you know, this series, QT Connect Cafes, wouldn't be possible by the support and with RBC, who's presenting this series. And I would like also to thank our partners, Sage, Unity Technologies, Sun Life, Ubisoft, VanHax, PaySafe, and Local Logic. Some of you might know that today, November 18, has been selected to celebrate and highlight the work and barriers of LGBTQ2S+ people in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM as we call it. Among their many struggles, we see that 28% of LGBTQ+ people have at some point considered leaving their jobs because of a hostile work environment or discrimination towards them. 20% of trans people have often considered leaving, according to the 2019 Exploring the Workplace for LGBTQ plus physical science, which is an abysmally high number, right? We've seen 1 in 3 physicists in America has been urged to stay in the closet to progress in their career, and half of the transgender or gender non-conforming physicists were harassed in their own department, according to the 2015 American Physical Society survey. So as you see, there is a lot of work that to do. These are statistics that really shows the barriers and issues that LGBTQ, trans people, and underrepresented groups face still in STEM today. And at Queer Tech, we are committed to support students and queer and trans students to join our rank and support them. So if you are a student or a trans student in STEM, you are welcome to join our community. We're here to support you, so feel free to reach out to us. So couple of weeks ago, as you know, we hosted the Career Job Fair and Conference, and it was a huge success. It was amazing to really reconnect with so many amazing cuties across Canada. Also, so many people came back, and it was a great vibe. And we had about 350 people who came to connect, network, hire, find jobs, learn. There were also about 582 interviews conducted during the 2 days. So really great job, everyone, for making this event a success. And stay tuned for our next event in April. Our job board is live for those who are looking for jobs in tech or looking to advance your career in tech. And you can go to queertech.org/jobs. And if you need any help to connect with our partner companies or need any advice, you can connect with me, Naufal, at queertech.ca. In next week, we're hosting, actually in a week and a half, we're hosting a great workshop with our partner, the Communication Security Establishment, on how to reverse engineer a software product. They call it, How Would You Like to Master the Art of Software Autopsy? So the Communication Security Establishment has designed the unique hands-on workshop where you'll get to taste a reverse engineering along with some great tips. And also they'll have opportunities for you if you're looking to join the Canada's Signal Intelligence Agency. So if you want to be a spy, this is your opportunity. So before we get started with our guests, for those who have questions or comments throughout the duration of our live stream, you can write your questions or comments on the comment box in the social media outlet you're watching us on. You can tag anyone who's looking for a job in tech or looking to advance their career in tech and need directions, inspiration, and or motivation, right? We can all do it, especially on a gloomy day like this in Montreal. So we might show also your comment on the live stream. Just be aware of that. And thank you so much for those who are donating to QueerTech and continue to support our organization. And for those who love what we do and want to support us, you can donate on our website, queertech.org. And thank you so much for those donations. So our guest today is John Schrag. He's currently the Director of UX Research and Architecture for Autodesk Media and Entertainment Product, the software used to create computer graphics, animation for film, special effects, television, video game, virtual reality, and architectural visualization. He spent more than 30 years designing a software tool for designer. And outside of work, John was a founder and for 7 years, the artistic director of Singing Out, the Toronto's LGBTQ chorus, which is now coming up to its 30th year performing. And after 30 years of making software for incredible artists, he's finally learning how to draw, which we're going to talk about it in a bit. So welcome, John, to the show. You may reveal yourself.
The paparazzi.
Hey, John, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for the great intro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to share your experience with us and with the QT members. And, I'm really excited to have you on the show. We haven't had a lot of conversation, a lot of UX design and research, and it's a big topic. I know a lot of fellow QTs who are graphic designer looking to make new careers into UX design, which is a great segue to it. So before we dive into your professional experience, would love to kind of just learn a little bit about, where you began your life, where did you grow up, where did you go to school? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I've had kind of in some ways, a very boring life. I haven't traveled around the world like a lot of people. I was born here, and actually I was born in Scarborough, which is now part of Toronto. But it was a separate city at the time, or borough. I was born here. We grew up. We're kind of a blue collar family. My dad was a plumber, and he died when I was a child. He died quite early, when I was 9 years old. And my mom, neither my parents had like post-secondary education, or even I think I finished high school at that point. Although my mom went and finished that in some university later. But as a result, we went through a really rough patch for a while. My mom was working a clerical job, like 60 hours a week, just to keep her 4 kids fed and housed, and that. So I went through that. I went to University of Toronto. Oh, sorry. I went through my whole childhood. I was at a music school. That was the kind of the fun thing. So that was a great experience. I went to, it was St. Michael's was attached to Cathedral in Toronto. It was a Catholic music school. And that's where I learned music and conducting and all of that stuff. But when it came down to it, compared to a lot of my classmates, I was kind of a mediocre musician. So super into computers were the new, like calculators were a new thing. I'm old, right? So computers, microcomputers were just coming out towards when I was the end of high school.
Wow.
I had a little Sinclair 1000 and I think an Apple II long before the Mac. And so I when I went to university, I took a computer course. I also took psychology, and I took astronomy, and I took a whole bunch of other things.
Absolutely.
I got a 98 in the computer course, and I said, maybe I should do this.
This is what, absolutely. So you were still doing music a little bit, or were you at that stage trying to explore what is it you're good at university?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got away from music. It's, I got away from Catholicism too for that same reason, right? When you're coming out, it's just kind of like, no, that's not going to fly for me. So I got out, but in university, there was an engineers show at the engineering department, and I ended up being a music director for a couple of years just because I had a useful skill there. Yeah. So I did that, and that was a lot of fun. Got musical theater, and actually a lot of the friends I still have today from that kind of period.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's interesting kind of like navigating university, and you mentioned you're, taking different courses and trying to figure out what you want to do. So once you kind of figured you liked computer, did you start learning software engineering? Was design on the radar back then? Where were you at?
So I was taking a degree in computer science, but I still liked some of the other stuff. So I was also doing a degree in linguistics. I have a double major. The two of them, psycholinguistics and computer science, are where I ended up. But the computer science stuff was the stuff I was getting good marks in. So of course I focused there to try and get out. And I really liked. I still love I barely program anymore, but I still really love it. I enjoy it a lot. But towards the end, I think when I was taking computer graphics, of course, I got super interested in, and that ended up being my whole career was computer graphics. But I was just so into it at the time. This is what I want to do. This is so cool. And the professor for that course was talking about human factors, and that got me really interested as well. But at that time, there was no undergraduate education. It was considered an extremely academic niche field. Like anything. It's funny because now you have to know basic UI to get through. But at that time, it was considered a very rarefied, specialized thing. There was a CHI conference, the Computer Human Interface Conference, but the only courses available were grad courses. So in my 4th year, I petitioned to go to take a grad course when I was still an undergrad. And I did that, and it was a great course. It was all readings in human-computer interaction, and every week that we'd get like 20 or 30 scientific papers to read and then critique. It was a huge amount of work, but it just gave me this huge overview of the entire field, which was a nice starting point for going forward.
Absolutely. And I'd love to touch base a little bit more on that, and once you get into the professional experience. But, kind of coming back, university is, for a lot of high school and university, is a very big, pivotal moment, especially for LGBTQ community. So I'm curious, throughout that period, was there any pivotal life moment that impacted your life back then? Was that something that came later in your career?
Yeah, in terms of my coming out. So I've known I was gay since I was 12.
Okay.
Puberty hit. It was like, oh my God, there we go. I seriously did nothing about it. Like everyone else I know has these great adventure stories in their teenage years. I did nothing. I just shut that down. You have to remember, because of my age. So I graduated from high school in 1982. Okay. But Ontario didn't have a guarantee of that you couldn't lose your job or you couldn't be kicked out of your home until 1986. That's when that law was passed in Ontario. So it wasn't I didn't feel safe coming out, and that I went through my entire university in the closet. I'm sorry, very sorry to say. I think I could have had a much better time if I'd come out of the closet.
Yeah.
And I actually had told myself that I'll wait till I'm done, get my degree, and then I'll come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got to say that a repressed sex drive gets you really good marks.
Yeah. It's one way to do it.
Yeah. So after I graduated, I did. As soon as that summer, actually the funny thing was that summer when I was just about to come out, my two best friends came out to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Well, they'd been a couple for the last some years, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
So that made it really easy for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're like, surprise, me too.
Basically, yeah. So then I started to get more involved in that.
Wonderful. And so kind of like once you did that coming out kind of towards the end of university, got your first job, was it in software engineering, software developer?
So my first job was just software. I was just a programmer.
Yeah.
I got a job in a computer graphics company. We did mapping software and business graphics.
Yeah.
I worked there for a few years in the closet. And then I had the opportunity to go work for Alias, which was the new hot company in Toronto for graphics. And it was the darling of the provincial government too for a while.
Yeah.
So that opportunity came up because I had a friend I used to help with his homework in university, and he worked there. And so he was able to get me an interview, and I got a job there when I was laid off from my first programming job.
Yeah.
So that job, I was trying to come in as more of a designer.
Yeah.
And they let me do it. But really at that time, design was more like if you were the person writing the code for the interface, you could control the design. So it wasn't so much an independent field. It was just starting to develop then. So I was kind of growing with a lot of my career. I've kind of been waving back and forth between programming and design. And it's really only the last 15, 20 years it's been.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would imagine in the 90s, if you were a software developer, you just created the design. When did you see the design becomes more and more important and kind of like split from that software developer function?
I think I was doing usability testing back in the early 90s. That was kind of a big thing, was the whole idea of usability testing.
Yeah.
It was a new idea, and my boss at the time was trying to introduce it to our company, and I jumped right on that because I wanted to do more of that kind of work.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that once you start doing it and you let people see it happening, that the value of it is so obvious that you can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Painful to watch for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was the gateway in, and of course, design comes from a few different fields. It's kind of the merging of people from ergonomics, human factors kind of background.
Mm-hmm.
One of my very best friends at the time, or actually two of my best friends, not the same two, were in industrial engineering, which is a lot of stuff about ergonomics. So it's that field, but it's also from the psychology field, and then just from the usability, engineering for quality things. So there's a lot of, and of course the artistic way. There's an artistic path into this. There's so many different paths that lead up towards a user interface and the UX and the psychology background. And that's my route was in more through psychology and programming.
Yeah.
Where is that intersection?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. So you continue really getting more and deeper in UX design, and now you're the director of UX research and architecture at Autodesk. And so tell us, what does that mean? What do you do day to day?
It's a little confusing, right? I have a funny title right now. I actually I was coming up as the path that Autodesk kind of splits. You're an individual contributor, you can be a designer, and you get kind of bigger titles.
Yeah.
At some point, you can choose to go off into management and manage designers, or you can stay as an individual contributor up through you can become an architect, and then director, and then VP is kind of the top end of the line as vice president. Although those are very recent.
Yeah.
So actually, I ran the whole design practice for a while at M&E, but at this point, they created a VP position, and so now I work for a VP, and she's been moving me around a little this year. So she's asked me to build this team and that team. So right now I'm building a design team. So that's why my title is where it is. It used to just be director of experience design. But so I've done a lot of different kinds of things. I like building teams and sort of getting new things. Up.
Wonderful. So would you say you spend your time mostly recruiting, growing the teams, training the teams? Do you still do any on the ground work in terms of UX research? And
bluntly, no.
okay.
It's one of the big things that comes as a shock when I went from being like a really senior designer.
Yeah.
You start like as a junior designer, you're working on a Scrum team, you're in a project.
Yeah.
What are we doing there? Well, Scrum teams now since Agile. But as you become more senior, you start to often work on more kind of vision-y things, like where we want to be in 10 years. Can we create a vision for that? And you're kind of thinking broader and more across the company. And then when I was invited to become a director, I thought, great, I'll grow out, I'll give me more influence in that. And I went through training and I got the promotion. And then suddenly I realized that the job is no longer really about design. You have to know design so that you can build a good practice.
Yeah.
And so you can have the right resources in place and make sure that your team is the right quality. But the actual job of a director is about practice, quality control, having the resources in place, managing budgets, and a huge amount of emotional labor. That is to say, because it's all about people, right? When I was a designer, I'd have hours and hours a day to think deeply and to dive into stuff. But as a director, I'm just meeting.
Yeah.
And the meetings are all, helping people solve problems, helping people develop their career paths, helping, unstick things, helping make the relationships between teams better, helping to drive the culture.
Yeah.
Super important work, but it's really different. It's a really different job.
Yeah. Well, I guess you accumulate over the year experience, and now you're passing it on to all these that you're building. And so, what are some of the key skills that are required, in terms of the role that you're doing? So it sounds like recruitment, hiring, managing teams. What else key skills that you think someone in that role needs to have?
In the director role specifically?
Yeah, in the director role specifically.
You got to have some good org savvy. You really have to kind of be willing to really understand people. One of the things I've been able to take a lot of my design research skills that I had and apply them in this job in ways I wasn't expecting. Like if you're a designer, you usually develop skills in anthropology, like ethnography, like you study users, you understand their working models, you understand what motivates them, you try and get their language. And it turns out you can apply that to your coworkers, you can apply that to your boss.
Yeah.
You just take the same set of skills. That took me a while to learn, but it's been really useful at times, depending on who I'm working for, and that where you can kind of take those skills and try and understand the people around you and how can you help better the things that are going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of young people, when we talk about, people always focus on the functional skills and competencies of a role, right? If I want to be a salesperson, I learn how to sell. And if I'm a UX, I'm going to learn the tools. But then there's this aspect of thinking of the career you want to get into, and networking in the organization, understanding how an organization functions, navigating the organization, and especially networking is such a key element to support you in kind of moving up the ranks in the organization, because it is that part of also being visible and contributing to the organization culture and direction, and not just being focused on the one thing that you do. So it's interesting to see that. Yeah.
The other thing is, if you really want to help the company out, there's a few things you need to do. One of them is coaching. Coaching is really important. There's always a gap at the top of companies. As leadership moves in and out, they always need people up there.
Yeah.
I'm lucky I work for a company that does like to promote rather than necessarily hire from outside.
That's great.
But so part of your job is to make your people better, right? Or to help them get. I'm not saying I don't have all the answers, but help coaching people in ways of getting better. So coaching is a separate skill itself that I spent time learning how to do. That's one of them. Another one is you have to be able to create a safe space for your people to. And it's kind of interesting because I started through the psychology angle and psychological safety.
Yeah.
The idea that everyone should feel safe in the team to speak their mind, that they won't get punished for it socially or politically. And being able to cultivate that, I think, should be a requirement for any manager.
Yeah.
Some are better than others. But I think being able to create that sense of safety in your own team. And this requires a good understanding of diversity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, in ways that I don't think a lot of people necessarily have. I teach psychological safety. I teach
Yeah.
workshops in it. That's a thing I do actually inside work and outside.
Wow. Yeah.
Because
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, this is really a key point you mentioned. One of so QueerTech, we're doing this research to understand LGBTQ experiences in tech. And already through some literature review that we've studied, we found that one of the biggest barriers for LGBTQ people or even other represented group, you know, people of color, Black, Indigenous. One of the things they've reported barriers at work is that a lot of time when they come out and if they're visible about their sexuality at the workplace, what they really find is that they have a hard time finding a mentor or someone to support them. Sorry, there's like a huge truck passing as I talk under my window. So yeah, it's like, and you know, a lot of times what we realize is that a lot of managers, especially when, you know, if you're like straight and you find someone who's similar to you, people get attracted to people who are similar to them, and you end up kind of developing a relationship for that person that are like you. And maybe if you are like, you know, straight and white, you might not necessarily see the gay Black person as someone that you mentor. So this is really important. How do you teach people to get out of that bias? A lot of people don't think about it. It's not intentional that they say, I'm going to exclude these people, and it's a drive, right? It's that happens. So it's really important to educate a lot of the managers as people get management role on how to navigate that and how to create a safe space and how to support these communities if you want to see diversity going up the ranks.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that. That is super, super important. And I've been, you know, I can be as guilty of that as anyone. I remember a couple of years ago, I try to have a really clear hiring, when I do hiring, which I do a lot of hiring.
Yeah.
I try to have a way of screening resumes that treats them all absolutely equal. Ideally, it's blacked out any information about the person's name, background, gender, and that's just look at qualifications.
Yeah.
Primarily, and we have a lot of other practices around how we write our job descriptions and that. But I remember once screening for an intern position, I had this criteria that I was on there. It's marking everyone against exactly this fixed criteria. And I catch myself, so I was looking at a resume going, this looks like a really interesting person. Someone like me, right? You know, someone I could relate to, and they wouldn't quite meet the criteria. And I'd find myself thinking, oh, but they seem really nice. Break.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, no. But it's so easy, and you feel like you're being a good person when you do it.
Yeah. Because it's how we were raised and educated, and it's that human instinct of you want to help, but you tend to see yourself in other people who are younger as we grow up. No, it's been really interesting, and the more I talk with managers and hiring, and a lot of people are like, you know, what is the one thing I need to do? And it's like, actually, this is one of the ways, if you're a manager, is like trying to look at other people who are from minority groups that you can take on and mentor and support and make them feel included. Because the other barrier we find is that people that type of behavior creates a sense of not belonging to a place, right? Because you don't feel like anyone cares about you, and you see, oh, my colleague in my team, the boss is really taking interest in them, and they're supporting them, and they're giving them advice, and you feel left out. So it's really important to do that. I'm gonna come and thank you. That was a good segue. Kind of, I want to go to the next question. And a lot of people from our community, and early on, actually, we've interviewed someone also from Autodesk who's from our community. They were a graphic designer. And they've struggled with graphic design, and it's hard when you're a freelancer. Graphic design work come and go, and they learned UX design and got a job at Autodesk, and they really love it. They're like, you know, they do mostly web stuff and design, and so I love it now because I think there is that career on where to go with UX design, and there's now UX research. There's so much that people can do. So for junior people who are like looking for making a career in UX design, what are some of the competencies and skill they should develop once they do that transition and get into the field?
Ooh, that's a good question. The field's shifted somewhat since I started.
Yeah.
I might give you a different thing, but as I was saying before, there's different routes in for it. So you kind of have to always sort of look at the entirety and bolster the things you don't have.
Yeah.
Or focus on the things you do. So if you're coming from like an industrial engineering background, you got your ergonomics down,
yeah.
but maybe you'll want to learn more about graphic design, for example, or learn more about some of the psychology, the sort of the media psychology, or even like just practical skills like how to run a usability test. And these are all available at different kinds of boot camps. But if you're coming from the graphic design angle, you can have really good things there, which give you a nice portfolio, but you really have to understand the behavioral aspects of it. So that would take you back to, like Don Norman's books, or I could rattle off a bunch of book titles, but that wouldn't probably be too helpful. But you want to focus on the things that are more about how people think, how people respond to the experiences they have, stimulus, and that. So it's and if you're coming from an engineering background, then it's good to get into understanding design process. Like there actually is a process around design. It's not just someone's bright idea. There's ways. Design thinking is becoming all the rage now in business, right? They're applying design thinking to all different fields, which I'm quite amused by, in a way, because it is a useful way of thinking. But really, what it comes down to is rapid iteration, early feedback, a critique process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And so, because you mentioned, like I come from a business and sales background, so I know UX design as an umbrella. But when someone comes as a UX designer, a junior UX designer, once they start looking at that, is UX design and there's UX research, are there other fields that they should look into that they might not be familiar with?
There's some specialties. Some people just do visual design, which is really graphic design with it's focused on that. It depends, because different companies will split up the work differently.
Yeah.
If you talk, so if there's someone up and coming, you generally, you pay your dues by doing first-rate stuff. You need to be able to understand a problem, break it down, figure out a solution, iterate on that solution, know if your solution's good. That's the hard part often. How do you be able to validate your solutions and then communicate them to developers? And you need to be able to do that collaboratively. So these are all kind of the blocks of skills that you need to be a generalist in the field.
To do. Absolutely. And in terms of competency, I hear like collaboration and working with other people is really important. Are there other like soft skills that people need?
Communication
skill.
Obviously, the whole designer's job is to communicate, right? That's the primary thing. If they can't communicate the design, they've failed. The other thing, the soft skills that are really hard are the ones involving getting information from people, doing validation, interviewing people, which all designers need to be able to do. You'll find sometimes there are designers who are all about their output. They have these great ideas, these things, but they're not good at listening.
Yeah.
And if you can't really listen and break down what you're hearing and dig into it and all that stuff and not be biased. So de-biasing your data elicitation is a really important skill. And it's one that a lot of people are a little bit weak on. And that's largely because it's hard to teach. You can teach the theory behind it, but it actually takes, I believe, coaching to make people good at it. So that's one thing where I still stick my fingers in is if I have new junior staff or the interns, I will mostly, not always, but I will mostly one-on-one coach them on some of that stuff. That's where I decide to be nosy.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's where your experience comes really good and supporting a lot of these young people to grow. And so in terms of, maybe we can give an example of at Autodesk in terms of how is your UX research and design teams structured right now?
We have a number of, Autodesk is in several industries. So every industry has their own team. Our team in media and entertainment is it's pretty typical. We have, teams of designers who are assigned to different initiatives that we have going on. We have a team that's of researchers who serve as like a service bureau almost to the design. They're involved all through it, but each researcher supports a number of teams rather than being embedded on one team. And we have ops. We have design ops, we have research ops, and we even have content ops. So we have a content team as well. And what they do is they're in charge of figuring out how people learn stuff. That's their question is, how do people learn this? So they work closely again with design. And that's we put together the whole experience, which includes, of course, the software you're producing, the learning materials, learning experiences that go with it. And that. So yeah, so we're divided, content, research, design teams, and then for each one we have an ops in it that kind of makes the process clean and takes care of all the details, removes the friction from the process.
That's great. And so these are all different paths that, when you come in as a junior in UX and kind of want to make that career, you can look at these different departments or functions as and then figure out which one you like and then kind of pursue that career. And so you also recently learned how to draw. Tell us, why did you want to learn drawing, and what was that learning process? And do you need it in the day-to-day work that you do?
I absolutely don't need it. It comes in handy. I wrote with a colleague of mine, we wrote a book on a course we wrote for designers for design for non-designers, essentials for non-designers. And I ended up doing a lot of the drawing, he and I together, like he did some, I did some, but we did all the drawing. So I was really glad that I could draw at that point. But it's just, I'd spent literally my entire career making tools for artists. So I'd make this tool and then an artist would take it and they'd do incredible things with it that I couldn't even imagine. And I'm like, I can't do any of that stuff. And I was down in California. I think I was visiting a friend of mine who worked at Google. And we were having lunch together. This was some years ago. And I said to him, I was just saying, I wish I could draw. Those artistic kids, and every school has artistic kids in the class, and they can draw, and it's great. And all I can draw is stick figures. And he looked at me like I was an idiot, and he said, "It's just a skill. You'll learn it like anything else. If you want to learn to draw, just learn to draw." And then he gave me a book. The book he gave me was called "Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain," and it's kind of for non-artists. So way to start into it, and that got me rolling. I went through that book, and then I started going to local life drawing classes, and I just sort of kept at it. And I'm not a great artist of any sense, but I'm very happy with the work I draw. I mean,
What kind of things do you draw now?
Oh, got a pad here. I draw mostly portraitors, mostly people. I like to draw.
Oh, that's wonderful. Drawing or in any skills, a lot of people sometimes you want to do something and you're like, I wish I want to do this, but a lot of things really, it's just taking time. And I've noticed during the pandemic, I know it's been hard on a lot of people, but some people really kind of took that time to like learn some of these skills, and it's just great to have that. And in today's world, right, like a lot of even young people we talk with, learning things, having a plan of new things that you learn can only be beneficial for your career. And it doesn't always have to be specific to what you do in your career, right? But learning drawing seems just like really a fun thing to do.
Oh yeah, I'm a bit of a skills junkie. I like to learn new things. It never occurred to me to apply that to drawing. It's that belief, something about this essentialism belief that if you're born one way, you can do this, and if you're born another way, you can do that. And of course, that's what we're all fighting against. Right?
Yeah.
This idea that your genetics determines your destiny.
And we know that most of it is probably not true. Learning is definitely. And so I want to go a little bit. Our community cares so much about inclusive design and building inclusive products. And so can you talk us a little bit, like in the field now that you've been there for a while, what are some of like the design trends that you're seeing in your area, especially when it comes to inclusive design?
Yeah, there's the old idea of nothing about us without us. I'm trying to remember the quote correctly. Inclusive design it's an idea that's going around more. I don't think it's been implemented as nearly as well as it should be. There are some places where it's mandated, like in the USA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I think there's an Ontarians with Disabilities Act, although that's more about building design. But the ADA in the US mandates a certain level of standards for any kind of services that are going to be purchased by the government or whatever. And that supposedly, in the perfect world, would give you good accessibility to people with certain kinds of vision difficulties or hearing difficulties or other motion difficulties, and there's different levels of that. And a lot of companies kind of just try and do the minimum, the absolute minimum available for that. But lately, inclusive design, I think, is reaching out to more than just accessibility to disabled people. It's thinking more about communities, especially because we have software now out there that is affecting whole communities, or that's affecting communication.
Yeah.
I mean, impacts far, well, I'm not going to say unpredictable, because a lot of people did predict it, but things weren't really paid attention to by the people in tech companies running them. And we really do have to think more about what these things mean. I can give a tiny example from my own life, or not really an example, but my company, or what, I can't remember if this company or my previous company, decided to, when we started getting smartphones, we started allowing use of smartphones at work. And they're scared. No company wanted to let their software be accessible through smartphones. It was a big security risk when the phones were new. And so they said, okay, you can do that, but you have to put this software on your phone that lets us monitor what's on your phone before we can that. So, it's in that. And the software, so I looked at the thing, and it said that the software would would give them a list of all the other software you're running on your phone. So I sent a note up. I said, if you do this, that list of software by itself could out people. You could, I could tell if someone was gay. I could tell if someone was pregnant. It could tell if someone's having specific health issues. Like I said, I don't think that's really reasonable.
No.
And to their credit, I don't know if it was my note. I sent that note. Within 24 hours, the company had reversed its policy on it. They said, they don't have that software. Yeah. And that's the case. Again, it's no one was trying to do anything bad. It's the people who were trying to protect the company, but they just didn't think outside of people like themselves.
Yeah, and it's probably someone who is not from the LGBT community, someone who's probably doesn't get pregnant or who doesn't have health issue, right? It's like it's easy to miss these things, and sometimes you look at it and you're like, "How did you miss this?" And you're like, "Well, this is the whole fundamentals of having diverse teams. Is you want all these people, so all the blind spot we have, someone is like, actually this, and it sounds so normal to your community, but not to other people."
But it's not enough to have diverse teams. You also have to have the psychological safety. Because if you have diverse team, but people don't speak up. So actually the three things you need, everyone has to understand that other people have an important perspective. Mm-hmm. You have to respect each other's perspective. And sometimes you're missing that. Sometimes, you get some engineer who thinks, oh, I'm a programmer, I know everything, or even someone in business who thinks that, or sales. You can get that attitude anywhere. So people have to recognize other people have perspective, and you have to have the structures in place to make people feel safe. When I do the psychological safety workshops, one of the questions I ask everyone is I say, think of a time in your life when you didn't feel safe to speak up in a meeting. And we do, we collect them on Post-it notes. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is every time I do this, I get people saying, I didn't feel safe because I'm the only woman in the room. I'm the only gay person in the room. I'm the only, Middle Eastern person in the room. Mm-hmm. I'm the only something. I'm the youngest person in the room. I was the most junior person. And you get all those things. And then what I ask people to do is turn it around and go, when you're in a meeting, do you notice who else there is the youngest person in the room, who is the only woman in the room, who is the only person of color in the room? And what do you do to make sure they understand that their contribution is valued? And I think that's a sort of a starting point to get that.
Yeah. So. That reflection. Absolutely. I mean, it's one way, as we say, diversity is not enough, and creating inclusive environment is important. And psychological safety is probably what comes at the fundamental of that inclusiveness, because if you don't feel safe and comfortable, you're not going to go beyond anything to be part of that team or contribute to that team. Time always flies very quickly, and so we need to wrap up a little bit. But I love asking our guests about what any advice that you have to junior UX designers or people who want to get into UX research today.
Try different things. I mean, look around. I don't have great advice. You know what? Actually, I want to actually give advice to more senior people.
Okay.
I think it's super, super important to mentor and to reach out and to give breaks to young people. I am perfectly aware that my success in life is at least 1/3 to 1/2 luck. Yeah. And getting breaks from people. So I want to encourage everyone to give breaks to people. Because we all need them. We've all needed them at some point. And if you have an opportunity, if you've got a younger person or the possibility to create an internship or to mentor somebody, give people a break if you can, really. That's
Absolutely.
really what I want to say.
Thank you. And especially in these times, right, where people there's a lot of mental issues and stuck at home and you're dealing with a lot of things sometimes, you just need to give that person a little break to deal with what they have to deal and let them come back. And I think that's a wonderful advice. John, thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge, experience, wisdom with us. We really appreciate it, and hope we'll have you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And so for anyone who's looking to connect with John, also, you can connect with them on LinkedIn. And you can see John's LinkedIn on the screen. Again, thank you for RBC for allowing us to deliver this series and presenting this series, a Qt Connect live stream series. And thank you, Sage, Unity, Technologies, Sun Life, Ubisoft, FunHacks, and PaySafe, and Local Logic for supporting this series. For those who love what we do and want to support QueerTech, you can always donate to QueerTech at queertech.org/support. It's your contribution support us and help the organization to continue and deliver stories like this. This is going to be the final Qt Connect Cafe for this series. December is a very busy month for everyone with the holidays coming in and wrapping up the year. I'm really excited that our QueerTech team is working very hard to create the plan for 2022 and really kick off the year with some amazing programming. So until then, I hope you stay safe and happy holidays, happy new year, and I'm looking to see you in January.